Today we're going to be going through bone growth and development and a few other things about bones. So, bones grow. Bone growth begins during prenatal development. Babies are born with skeletons. It continues through adulthood. Your skeleton, none of your skeletons are done growing yet at this point. So bone matrix is calcium phosphate. So it is this inorganic salt with calcium ions. We have phosphate ions. There are two forms of bone development we are going to talk about. There's going to be intramembranous bones, and then there are going to be enchondral bones. Most bones are enchondral. The intramembranous bones are going to be flat bones. Sternum and clavicle and mandible develop this way. So we're going to start with the intramembranous bones. As I said, that's going to be the flat bones, the mandible, the clavicle, and I believe the sternum, which is a flat bone. So what happens here is there are going to be connective tissue cells early in development that arrange. They're going to begin to produce calcium phosphate. They're going to then make spongy bone. On the outside of that spongy bone, they're then going to produce a layer of compact bone, and that's pretty much the process. A more complete version of it is sheets of undifferentiated connective tissue appear at the sites of future bones. That partially differentiated connective tissue collects around blood vessels. Connective tissue further differentiates into osteoblasts, which deposit spongy bone. So osteoblasts are bone-producing cells. They produce bone matrix. They produce calcium phosphate. So osteoblast produces calcium phosphate. So the osteoblasts become osteocytes when bony matrix completely surrounds them. So when the osteoblast completely builds itself into calcium phosphate, it then is renamed a osteocyte. Connective tissue at the surface of the developing bone forms a perosteum. Then osteoblasts on the inside of the perosteum deposit compact bone over the spongy bone. So that then leaves us with this sandwich where there's going to be spongy bone, compact bone on either side. Now, the other type of development that we have is enchondral bones. This is more common. Most of the bones in your body are enchondral bones, all the long bones, many other bones. So with enchondral ossification, there are going to be masses of haline cartilage that form models for future bones. The cartilage tissue is going to break down, perosteum is going to develop, blood vessels and differentiating osteoblasts from a perosteum invade the disintegrating tissue. Osteoblasts form spongy bone in the same space occupied by the cartilage. Osteoblasts beneath the perosteum deposit a thin layer of compact bone. Osteoblasts become osteocytes when the bony matrix completely surrounds them. So rather similar. The main difference here is that with enchondral ossification, we start with these cartilage models, that we do not have these cartilage models with our other method. So your long bones continue to lengthen through your entire life. The way they do that is through growth at epithelial plates. If you look at an X-ray of a child's bone, it is going to appear as if it has a break in it. That is not a break, that is a thin layer of cartilage. So there are these 4 layers of cartilage that exist at this epithelial plate, which is a growth plate in a bone. It is between the diaphysis and the epiphysis. It's how your bones lengthen, how you get taller. So there are 4 layers of this cartilage. Starting with the bone tissue of the epiphysis, we have the zone of resting cartilage. Then we have the zone of proliferating cartilage, the zone of hypertrophic cartilage, the zone of calcified cartilage, finally we reach the ossified bone of the diaphysis. So this spans from the epiphyseal bone to the bone of the diaphysis, which is going to be getting ossified. So the zone of resting cartilage, it does not participate in growth like the name says. So it's resting, it anchors the epiphyseal plate to bony tissue of the epiphysis. So to remind you of how we name these parts, we have the diaphysis is the long shaft, the epiphysis is the head of the bone. So next we get to the zone of proliferating cartilage. This is where there is growth happening. So these cells are dividing, they're performing mitosis. So this is where the growth is happening, is at this zone of cartilage which is reproducing. Now we get to the zone of hypertrophic cartilage. As those cells that have reproduced age, that cartilage continues to thicken, and then osteoblasts begin to invade the oldest layer, secreting calcium salts. So these osteoblasts invade into this cartilage, and they start to turn it from cartilage to bone. So then there's the zone of calcified cartilage, dead cells and calcified, which is a mixture of dead cells and calcified cellular matrix. This will later be remodeled by osteoclasts. So this is not yet quite proper bone. It is mineralized, but it still needs to be remodeled by osteoclasts and then be relaid as proper bone matrix. So this is done by a cell type called the osteoclast. The osteoclast, osteo refers to bone, clast refers to breaking. So they break down calcified matrix. They don't do this by physical breaking, they do this chemically, going over using enzymes and acid to dissolve the calcified bone matrix. So they use acid to attack inorganic salts, they use enzymes and lysosomes to digest organic components. After the osteoclasts remove calcified cartilage, it's replaced by bone from osteoblasts. So osteoclasts and osteoblasts work together to remodel bone. Osteoclasts dissolve down this stuff that wasn't quite laid down properly. Osteoblasts then go back and produce proper bone matrix. If you have had braces, the reason why we can rearrange our teeth in our mouth is because we are literally remodeling our jawbones. You are remodeling how your teeth fit into your mandible and your maxillae by breaking down that bone chemically and physically and rebuilding that bone as your teeth shift. So we got a little bit more on bone function. So bones, they support, they protect, they help with motion, they help with blood cell formation, and they store inorganic salts. We need to talk a bit about blood cell formation and inorganic salt storage. So they give body their shape, they protect the skull, the vertebral column, the ribs, they all are doing the obvious protecting. They provide framework for muscles. I don't know what this clip is. We already saw Miss Granger do that. So, we're going to pick up with blood cell formation. So, blood cell formation is a process called why do I have to pronounce this? Hemappetite. I am picturing all of you laughing at me at home, so I'll just let you laugh at me at home. Have fun. So, Your blood cells are going to be produced in your bone marrow. So marrow is a soft connective tissue that forms blood cells. So red marrow forms blood cells, yellow marrow stores fat and does not make cells. So where you produce blood changes as you age. When you are young, almost all of your bones are producing blood. They almost all are full of red marrow. As you age, your blood cells are going to be produced by your pelvis, your ribs, your skull, and then your carpals and tarsals and metacarpals and metatarsals. So the location of marrow changes with age. There's a general reduction and there's a movement to a point where only these places that are in red are going to have red marrow. So the last function of bone that we need to talk about is inorganic salt storage. So inorganic salts, which would be calcium phosphate, make up about 70% of the weight of bone matrix. So calcium is needed for muscle contraction. Your heart, incidentally, is a muscle. So we are storing calcium in your bones. So some of this calcium you need to do metabolic processes. You're not just holding on to it as a structural building material. These calcium ions are also incredibly important to our nervous system, which is why we say we are storing the calcium. It's not just being used as a building material of the bone matrix. So that is the end of the bone chapter. So I gave you the bone lab, which hopefully isn't too confusing or too simple. So hopefully that lets you work on IDing some bones on your own. I am going to be giving you a few more of the bone coloring pages because we just don't have the way for you to interact with the stuff like we would in a normal year. So we are going to be starting joints pretty quickly. I'm going to be again giving you a small written test. It is going to be questions from the book, and I'll try to be much more clear on which ones are assigned and which ones are not assigned. But that's all for today, so thank you and have a good day.